Hello, and welcome to a new episode of We Built It Because We Had to. I'm really pleased to have a longtime friend, client, colleague with me, Gil Allouche from Metadata IO. Now, I first met Gil, welcome. I first met Gil back in probably 2015 or 16, and he had an idea for a company, laid it out on a PowerPoint deck. We started talking as advisor to CEO founder. And remarkably, Gil has built an incredible company. It's weathered ups and downs in the market. It provides tremendous value. I'm going to have Gil tell you about it, but it was funny to find out that we now live within a matter of miles from each other. I was from San Francisco. Gil lived in San Francisco. We're now recording this from St. Petersburg, Florida. So welcome, Gil.
I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for being a long-time supporter. Allouche, can't believe you don't know that 10 years in, but
I don't have the Israeli accent.
it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So walk us back to that point in time in 2015 or 16 when the spark came to your mind. Now, you were a VP of marketing multiple times.
That's right.
By background, you come from actually a coding background, an engineering background.
Yeah.
You got into marketing, so you brought a lot of data analytics to the marketing game. What was that moment of time after having several jobs in your career track that Metadata IO came to your head, and what made you just want to start it?
I'll start from the end. What made me start it is being invited to a roundtable that I did with Bessemer venture partners in Menlo Park. There were a bunch of CMOs there, and I was telling them about this concept of multivariate execution and automating everything and being super accurate with the advertising. And the idea resonated a lot. And I got a bunch of people who asked me, like, how can I do this? How can I work with you? And in that coffee break, I went on LinkedIn, forgot to uncheck the let everyone know. And I changed on the spot, stealth or whatever I wrote down. And that night I got at 3 a.m. in the morning, I got the domain for metadata. That's the end of it, truly how it happened. What caused it to begin with is my first experience after MBA is this company called Spotfire. It's a small little company in Davis Square, and I was a product marketing manager. But I got the CMO, Mark Lorion, who's a famous, very successful CEO today. He told me, hey, Gil, you're going to get bored doing product marketing only, for sure. So here's a project. And he basically told me with nicer words, you can't fuck this up. So worst case scenario, don't worry about it. Right. If you make something out of it, but it was a cloud version of Spotfire, which was an analytics, think a Tableau. Think Tableau, but a little bit earlier. They were selling it for like $1.5 million for 3 years on premise, if you remember.
Really? Yeah.
Then there was this cloud version that all of the customers on the cloud, it was grossing about $50K a year. No one cared about it.
Right.
And they were about to shut it down. And first day, I got the green light to play with this. I called every customer. I remember I went to the product manager. I told him, hey, I'm about to go to the conference room to call the customers who are paying right now. He's like, what? Where would anyone pick up? He was like laughing at me for thinking about it. And I went to the conference room and I picked up, and some hung up, some put me in voicemail, but maybe 5 or 6 customers talked to me that day. And, basically I started doing what I'm doing, what software for Metadata does today. I started running a lot of different experiments, creating lots of different offers, different templates, different creative, different messages, different channels. And I just let it run, very little budget in the beginning.
Right.
My roommate was the SDR. He was an SDR for Spotfire. I made him the AE for this product.
Okay.
Deborah was the receptionist, made her the billing manager. And before we knew it, it's been maybe 18 months. It was $1.5 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
From 50K.
50K back then. And the AEs, the account executive for that company, could not care less about what I'm doing because 50K for the entire business versus $50.5 million per ACV that they would sell until they did. And so in the beginning, I called all the customers. I started running experimentation at scale. I started building all different templates for the product, different offers, different audiences. Like one of them was the energy. Like there were people using it for oil and gas.
So you're verticalizing the
Verticalizing, exactly, and creating permutations, but within a closed scope. So life science, energy, fintech, finance, there were three of those obvious ones. They're like 80% of the revenue. And I started running campaigns, email campaigns, discount campaigns, and some ad campaigns. And I reused the money that we generated. My friend back then, he was my roommate. He was an SDR for Spotfire. I told him, hey, you can be an account executive for this. He was great at it. I was a sales engineer on top of my GMing this thing. And Deborah was the secretary. She was the billing manager. And long story short, we made it into about $1.5 million in about 18 months.
wow. Wow.
Great experience. Still not huge numbers, but it was on zero budget.
Right.
And it was about to be shut down. And then it kept growing. Like I remember every week they would bring me to the leadership meeting, and I had this nice Spotfire dashboard to show Spotfire Cloud. It's growing.
And for context, this is about 2010.
That's right.
So having done a survey back at that time for a client of mine, I remember it was about 12 SaaS apps per enterprise at that time. And of course, now it's hundreds. So you're kind of at the leading edge of that trend. So when you say 50,000 to 1.5 million in 18 months, I think that's phenomenal.
Yeah. If it was still startup by itself, it would have been successful, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about 12 SaaS. Now it's 100. It's going to be 12 very soon with agents.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it was a good experience. Talk about it under the context of what made me start this. And that was my first experience touching revenue. Look, I was a software engineer before in Israel.
Right.
I was a good software engineer, but I never saw the life cycle of the sale. Like I would be, when I did robotics, I would be polished with it. I do remember one time seeing the contract that the company had. They paid me 35 shekels per hour, which is like $10 today, $10 per hour. But they charged the customer $65 per hour. Why is the big ass difference between the work and the return? And anyway, I was very interested in the commercial part, understanding how it works, generating demand and then closing demand.
Right.
And that was my first experience doing that. And it was addictive. I remember that I would check that, like people check Stripe every day. I would check the Spotfire dashboard, and it was addictive. It was really cool to see the feedback loop.
Yeah.
And see the business growing. It grew to about $2 million before the CEO of TIPCO took it, invested in it, grew it much, much bigger and sold it. Great outcome for TIPCO. And I spent the next 8 years doing the same thing in smaller and smaller company until the place where we met.
Yeah, that was 2015. I think you exited as the VP of marketing, and we came in and filled the gap with the Artesian Network team. So that's how we met.
Yep.
So 2015 or 60, somewhere in there, you had the aha moment for Metadata IO. Now, wasn't this at a Bessemer event?
That's right. It was a BVP event. They invited me to do a talk with a roundtable with CMOs. And I was talking about the revenue marketing and about experimentation and using data as a means to an end to activate, to create demand. It resonated with a bunch of people to the extent where a bunch asked me how couldn't they do this with me, or how is it possible to practice this? And I just went in the coffee break and changed my LinkedIn to entrepreneur or founder, stealth, whatever it is that I put there. So to uncheck tell the network about it. So I got a lot of congrats, and very stressful because you're not really ready for it. But that was 2016. And I never looked back after that. It was a great experience starting it even.
Got it. So is it fair to say after the 2010, 11 Spotfire thing, you've sort of relented on being the software developer first and became the marketer, sales, company leader bend, but you've never lost your roots in software development.
That's right. And these days, especially with AI, I was just giving that talk you were in. You don't need a developer today. It's good to have one if you can have one, but you can take your idea and implement it with AI these days. And having the software engineer mindset tells you, it removes limiting thoughts. So I saw that was available to me as a marketer. I knew that is possible to make as a software engineer, and that gap was huge.
Right.
super big. I remember my customers at Cubo were, what was it? Comly Media, App Nexus. Do you remember those?
Yeah, of course.
B2C
That's
advertisers. They had the nicest technologies for consumers,
Mhm.
and we're dealing with like legacy enterprise software,
right.
working, no tracking.
Right.
And so that was that gap.
Interestingly, last week or the week prior, Gil put on a meetup presentation through Luna, and it was really well attended from elderly people down to the youngest 10-year-olds in the room. And it was really inspirational. So, over 2 hours, 2.5 hours, he walked people through building agents using various different platforms and then showcased what he had built himself, starting with a storybook maker for his kids, serving his own needs to come up with a new story. I think you do 4 stories a night.
That's right. Oh, yep.
And it since has its own following and website, I believe. But it was
A nice one ad.
the message to everyone was go out and build now. And in the back of the room, the 2 10-year-olds created their own games using Claude Code in the time that Gil gave the speech. So anyway, thank you. You haven't lost track to your community efforts and to your web dev, or code dev life.
Yeah, you have to have fun. Fun is back.
Fun is back. It is back. So since that speech, I've got my own Mac Mini.
Nice.
And have a number of agent-based platforms. So Gil, you've inspired me firsthand. We're already automating big parts of our business too.
That's wonderful.
So, okay, next. There is that idea at Bessemer. Did they ever become investors?
No, but they were great friends, but not the rest.
Okay. Well, when I think I met you when you had your company basically in a PowerPoint pitch and you were refining the messaging, positioning, and I worked with you as an advisor. What was the first money moment? Did you have an MVP? I can't even remember. Did you have an MVP first, or was it all concepts?
It was like this, like the usual story of a startup. There's
Yeah.
no straight line whatsoever. I started in Startup Weekend. The first thing I did is go to Startup Weekend. I got elected up. I was chosen to one of the ideas was like, the group of 100, you get like 6, 7 groups,
Right.
and the rest the teams come and help you build. And that weekend we tried to build metadata. We didn't succeed, but we proved that people will pay for it.
Okay.
And I remember like we broke into a co-working space as part of that weekend. It was hilarious. It was a fun experience. After that, I joined 500 startups, and my first MVP was an enrichment tool. You put a bunch of emails in a CSV file, you get back all of the PII, all of the job title, company, all the information. Very quickly, I realized that this by itself is going to be a bit of a race to the bottom.
Right.
The data itself will become a commodity. The activation of the data is where the value comes into place, and anyway, where my expertise was more of my core competency to activate the data. And I used the tool that I built, the first version, to do consulting.
Okay.
And with the consulting, that's what I did. I did it to do my customer development. I got to about 20 customers, and I did the same thing for them. I did the data targeting, started running ads. I remember the first customer I had, he had a director of demand generation who didn't like the idea of metadata doing that kind of work that he used to do. I had like three spreadsheets open, 3 screens. And he was the first time that the machine beat I think it was pretty good at what it did, but you can't have the scale of a machine. And it was the first time the metadata beat a regular marketer. And I realized back then, okay, there is something here.
Yeah.
It needs to be shaped, but there is a concept here that can work.
That's right. Now, I remember in those PowerPoint days when we were working together on messaging, you were very early in adopting an AI empowerment message. I mean, it was pretty early. Though you had 1,000 monkeys in the back pulling levers,
Totally did, yep.
the vision was there, right? The inspiration was there. You've since reached that. But that was 2016, 17, right? And it wasn't until 17, 18 that Google even had the transformer model white paper out, which created the modern LLM. So you were kind of in the first end of the wave of operationalizing AI uh, conceptually.
Yeah, I remember we had a T-shirt called the AI operator, and for marketing or for advertising, and it was just like way too early.
Yeah.
You can die being a little too early. I'm thankful that we stuck to it, but it was very very early.
It was.
No one wanted to talk about AI taking jobs. Let me tell you, time and time again. I think maybe even you and I were talking about it.
Yeah.
You're going to alienate your customers by telling them you're going to replace them.
Yeah.
But fast forward today, of course, it's super obvious. But even 2 years ago, I remember the first time I got a meeting from a prospect, and he told me, "Hey, Gil, I need you to put the meeting as private on the calendar." I told him, "Okay." He told me, "Because if my team sees that I'm meeting with you, they would know that truthfully we are looking to cut and reduce headcount." And I've had this conversation and over and over. Not to say that AI has to take the jobs for marketers, but the technical, repetitive, mundane tasks, those jobs are better done by AI.
There isn't a scenario where AI doesn't eliminate jobs increasingly over time, just period.
Agreed.
Actually, I read a study the other day that the average knowledge worker processes about 20,000 words a day, reading, speaking, writing, but on average about 20,000. And AIs can now do that for less than $200 an entire year. And of course, they can do much more than 20,000. But if they were just to keep the pace with a knowledge worker,
Yeah, the information out there. No, it's so fast. It's so you have to be careful with AI, of course, with the hallucination and all that good stuff.
yeah.
But it's definitely there.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that point, do you think looking back, it's been easier developing prospects into customers that are large and established companies that want to reduce headcount? The small, sort of fast growers that want to reduce the need for future headcount. You see what I'm saying?
I
Like,
see what you're saying.
yeah.
I can tell you what the numbers say.
Okay.
I like the small companies
Okay.
because they move fast and they're risk takers.
Yeah.
I don't like the small companies because vast majority of them evaporate. And so
Yeah.
if you if you have a PLG motion and you essentially get thousands of new accounts at least every month, and you know how to convert those in a funnel, you do the SMB play.
Right.
I didn't. And we see our enterprise customers like Zoom and Magic Monitor or Notion and Automation Anywhere, those companies, they stay with you forever because you become like mission critical for them. Like if one of the prospects we talk to right now, they have $50 million in spend per year.
Mm-hmm.
Good luck running 50,000 permutations with any size of agency.
Right.
It's very hard. Um, and that kind of headache is completely abstracted when you use a system like Metadata. You never have to log into Reddit or X or AdWords or LinkedIn or Meta or any of those. So you never have to buy data and upload audiences and spreadsheets, UTM tags. All of that becomes very monstrous when you have a big operation.
Right.
So we find that for those who are mission critical, for the smaller ones, it's harder. It's very hard to excuse paying for software to manage a small budget.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I understand. And for those not particularly familiar with metadata IO, Gil's original thought, which has now been fully brought to fruition, is that you have all different kinds of content classes and types, and you have various audiences with different personas, and you have different ad types across different channels. And through this, metadata allows you to effectively do A/B testing at super scale so that you can combine all different combinations until you have the greatest ROI opportunity presented to you by the machine. Did I misrepresent anything on that?
No, that's right. Multivariate experimentation. So it's more than A/B testing. We can check like 5, 6, 7 different variables. And what sources the most pipeline? And I'm talking about like harsh rules. Like you ran an ad, someone converted, they created a new opportunity and became the main decision maker in that opportunity. It doesn't happen within, let's say, 30 days. Only then we count it as source. And when we do, then that feedback loop comes back into the machine. It's like, okay, which job titles were involved in the deal?
Mhm.
Let's expand the audience. And how do you decrease the CACs? If you have an ad on LinkedIn, can you replicate it on Meta? Can you replicate it on Reddit? Can you cut the cost by half? And so all of those, all of the advertising operations around it is done for you by a machine. We have about 100 agents, give or take, that each do something different.
Right, right, right. So let me test an idea by you. So in our experience at the Artesian Network, in selling to enterprises, we usually find on average, there are 6 to 7 constituents or personas that you need to map out. One's the primary buyer, but there are constituents that could torpedo the deal or help it accelerate. Do you find that same number?
The whole motion is very different.
Okay. Now, the other variable that we've tested over time and holds as a constant is that psychologically you have to hit those 6 to 7, or in your case, 30 people 5 to 6 times within, say, a 90-day period in order to trigger, statistically trigger an action. Do you find that to be?
Definitely. And it's good to do multi-channel, right? So you run an ad on social, you send an email, you do some thought leadership, and you target the same people over and over and over and over.
Right.
And then it's going to help it's compounding effect. And yeah, it's definitely a good idea to do it with multiple folks, because if you don't multi-thread in accounts like that, you're in big risk.
Big risk, big risk. Okay. But interesting, we find ourselves, that's a good validation point I'll bring back to the teams. Now, tell me about your first money raise.
Okay. First money raise was Alchemist Preview Day. That was an event that Alchemist Accelerator does to prepare you for presentation. And they bring friendly investors to give you feedback. I met this gentleman called Kevin from Right Side Capital.
Mhm.
And I think the first thing he told him is, so I'm giving Jan credit because the first money came from there.
Mhm.
I did not raise that myself. I don't know much about marketing. Gil is the expert there.
Mhm.
And Kevin told him, I also don't know anything about marketing. So that's good. Like, let's start there. And he explained to him what the business was about. And within that 15, 20 minutes, he got a lot of interest. We got another call and we raised our first 100K. It was small check, but a very significant check.
Yeah.
For us, it's a lot of validation. And after that, we raised a few more hundred from angels and from 500 startups. And eventually we raised our seed from Hills Vein Capital.
Okay.
Which I think you remember.
I do remember.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember going to a couple of those board meetings and yeah.
Right.
Great. So that was your seed.
That was my seed.
And what was the total?
1.6.
1.6. Okay. Now that got you to start realizing more formally your vision for metadata. So I assume when you tell me you came back and started hiring developers and moving things or contracting out development and moving the product forward.
Yeah.
Is this the time that we came in to start helping marketing operations?
I think you came maybe a little bit later.
We didn't have much money, so we had to take stock instead of money.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember where it was, but I think you probably came around 2018, 19 maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Our first version working without interns doing the work or junior employees from Praxis, that was 2019 going into 2020. Up until then, it was some technology, some services. The first thing I did with the money is, hire 2 developers and try to crank up the machine. And that was the first version. We had 3 versions of metadata, start from scratch until we have what we have today.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, do you rely in any way current day on back-end LLMs for support?
No, I use a lot of machine learning.
Okay.
We use machine learning. I wrote a few patents on for metadata using machine learning, normalizing data, predicting outcomes, etc. But no LLM.
So you're fully contained now as a platform.
Oh yeah, and maybe we're a little bit more than 2.5 or around 2.5 years of integrating LLM and setting up metadata to be for a world where you log in and you log out from your day into LLM and everything is driven by an agent versus a human.
Right. Right. Interesting. Okay. Well, so what do the next couple of years look like? You went on, by the way, to raise ultimately a Series A and then Series B. So what's your total raise today? 50 million into this company. Okay. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I learned how to do that. That was a great lesson by itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a very interesting journey. And it's like this again. We were profitable for a second, then we raised and stopped being profitable, and we're in that same. We're back at growth, and we're about to hit profitability, which is nice. It's nice to have control over your destiny.
Yeah.
And we didn't raise since 2021, and I'm happy with the journey. And it's funny because now the market is converging into what we do, into using artificial intelligence at scale.
Mhm.
And now that we know who do we fit perfectly, those enterprises, it's much easier to do business.
Interesting. Well, just a couple final questions. Are you using any agentic processes to run your company?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that because I know you're a builder and early adopter. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I have Headless and OpenClaw agents running. I was telling you I have my Mac Mini right here in my bag.
yeah.
I have another one running on a laptop, and it has a copy into a server. And they do things like email, um, triage. They do a website maintenance, blog writing, social media. So I use that. I also have about 200 or so workflows on make.com. My account manager wakes up in the morning, click button. It goes through all of their accounts. It shows them how it's doing. It logs in Metadata. It does a lot of the work for them. So that, because they have a large number of accounts where, in order to be profitable, we had to be nimble and lean. And that gives you the extension you need.
So you get super leverage of the folks you do have on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I think it's a must today.
Oh my God. I don't know. Uh, the companies that are not deploying agentic systems now, carefully measured, maybe human in the middle. We're going to talk about that in a second, but they won't be here in a few years. They just won't be here.
And the skill set, if you're in tech and you don't get your hands dirty with the latest technology, or that's a big advantage of being in tech to begin
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I've always loved it. So, in your agentic flows that you have today, especially on the take action side of things, do you still have man in the middle, or I should say human in the middle?
The way I did it is, um, first of all, audit what is being done today.
Mm-hmm.
Then see what is being done that leads to an outcome. Because let me tell you, vast majority of things that we do all day are not leading to outcome.
No.
So that's the first work, super manual. Then I took all of those lab data. I'm using a system called Time Doctor. Using all of that data, I fed it into. Back then there was not AI when I started. Like the LLM was not a highly appliance, and so I use this company called Odeta. They have a nice workforce in place like Pakistan, and they took the Time Doctor. They saw what people are doing, what software they're using, so on and so forth. They wrote a human in the loop process, SOP essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I took that and hired a guy from Chandigarh, from India, to do make.com workflows.
Okay.
That's how it started. And they told me we saved about a week per month. That was good. That was 25%. Well, I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
But if you could save 25% a year, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, you can create 10x today.
Yeah.
And so now the next level was, forget about, there's a Claude and ChatGPT in the middle, and Manus. That was kind of my journey to get to Claude Code.
Mm-hmm.
Claude Code and Codex are the main two tools I use today to start a process, to build a new website, to create new blog posts, to create the commercials. I just started creating commercials for Metadata. That kind of work,
Yep.
it starts with synchronous work. I sit down, I think about an idea, I work with Claude Code, and I produce the first few artifacts. Once it's becoming somewhat stable, like the new website, then I can hand it over and say, hey, now you're an autonomous agent. You have your own heartbeat. and you have a cron job. You every hour you check to see you do A/B testing on your own. You do blogging on your own. You're like a live entity. So those are the three stages that I use.
How often do you check in with them just to I mean, you went through a trial period until you trusted them.
You have to, you have to. The way I did it is limit the scope of risk. Limit the risk. So like worst case scenario, this is what happens. As long as we're cool with that, just like any other thing in life, you can go far.
Right.
Because doing it halfway with me checking everything doesn't make any sense. The whole point is to see how good does it do on its own. And so, yes, I will review content before, and I will set up a testing harness. Like I build the website, and then I put immediately given capabilities to open a browser and take a look at the browser, take a screenshots of the thing, send it to like an LLM console to understand if this is good content or not good content. There's all these techniques you can use, and I like to hand it off and see how good what comes back. If it makes some obvious mistakes like make up shit, hallucinate, agree with you for everything, you have to set up rules and say, hey, this is a good example for what not to do. Let's not repeat that one. And I would say every time you learn how to use AI better.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, over time, AI becomes so much better. Between those two, if you start working now, you're going to get to a place where you're just perfect fit into the technology available and your skill set, and you're just going to be able to surf it. And that's why I always recommend people to start building it today.
Well, really good words of advice. Useful to anyone who's listening, frankly, no matter what industry you're in. So in conclusion then, I know it's hard to tell the future, but do you see a path to a Series C? You mentioned a path to profitability, so there could be growth out of revenue and profits. What do you see for your company in the coming years?
It's hard to tell, depending on how fast the growth will take off. I would say if we go back to the growth that we saw a couple of years back, then yes, there is an opportunity for a Series C. But I would say equally possible to just continue the way we are. It's also what you can do today with AI and extend yourself was impossible before.
Right.
And so, you know, with the new entrepreneurs these days, I tell them you don't have to raise money, and it won't necessarily
That's right.
make you move faster. It will make you burn more money faster, that's for sure. But maybe having some scarcity is going to make you much more creative and give you focus.
Absolutely.
And that's something I think is very easy to lose in the Silicon Valley VC.
That's true. I think all the companies that have raised over the past few years will find a much longer life cycle use out of that funding. They are taking some of the newer AI technologies to extend their runways.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a money chasing opportunity to force it to grow through panic spend.
Right. Yeah. But
Uh,
scaling, and that existed. And I think for some companies it worked really well. But I think for majority of companies, it does not work.
Right. Right. Well, Gil, I want to thank you for being my friend and for joining us here on We Built It Because We Had to. A lot of great lessons. You have a wonderful story. It's a pleasure to watch it continue to succeed.
Thank you, sir.